We've got about an hour, and I'm going to give you essentially 4 10-minute talks. And Elizabeth wanted me to give you a deep dive into some of my biggest projects. And you'll notice that none of them use a head-mounted display like the one out there, because in the past, I mean, before just a few years ago, they were garbage. But virtual reality is still virtual reality, as you'll see. So first, a very brief introduction. Whoops. Thank you, Elizabeth, for your introduction to me. Just to let you know a little more, my doctorate is in information science. That's the, can you turn that down a little? Is in information science. That's the psychology of how people process information. And it doesn't just happen in your head, it happens throughout your body, in your environment. And my dissertation was on VR for education, and you'll get to see that. So for 25 years or 23 years, this was me, right? Because VR has been around since the 70s, but it was so expensive that you could only do it for military aerospace, for the automobile industry, people with tons of money. That Vive out there, the big headset, it's $600. 4 years ago, you had to spend $200,000 to get something equivalent, and it wouldn't actually be as good. So, immersive media is a broad term that includes augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, and all of that. So let me see. Let me get my little timer going so that I don't blather too long. Augmented reality brings digital objects into the physical world. We have a HoloLens out there and an object, so you can walk around it and it stays put. Immersive film, we have a Gear VR, and it's like a movie in the headset, and you're there and you can look around. You can also have still shots there, so it takes you someplace else. Virtual reality also does that, but it lets you participate in that virtual world. So you can interact with the people and things there, like that little dog, the little robot dog in the VR that people were chasing around. And then you have the multi-user virtual environments. These are like World of Warcraft, the old Second Life, Altspace VR, where you're represented by the avatar. And what they all have in common is that your body is the center of reference for all of these. In augmented reality, the digital objects are drawn just for you. Unless you're doing like networked AR, then it's drawn just for the people who are wearing the headsets. In immersive film, you have a location in that world. In VR, you also have a location, but you can have a body. You can actually look down and see that you're a different race, a different gender. You can be a mythological creature. And in the multi-user virtual world, you have an avatar. Now, a multi-user environment is only accessed through the desktop. But once you are emotionally bought into the environment, if something threatens your avatar, your heart will jump. So that's why these multi-user virtual environments belong with all the others. And don't forget sound. Sound is very important. It's 50% of the experience of life. You can use sound to localize objects. It's another channel for information, and it's generally ignored and underused in immersive media. Interaction devices, well, you get your game controllers, little joysticks and buttons. This is boring, but it's reliable. If you're doing a demo, this thing won't break on you. Things like the Mio armband, it reads the muscles in your arm. so it can read various gestures. And these are just a few examples. You have the tracked hand controllers. So the headset, that big Vive, the Beehive you had, has those two paddles. So you use these for manipulating objects. The Leap Motion controller, it's under $100, and it will create an electronic shadow of your hands. And if the software allows for it, it'll let you track, use those hands to interact with objects. So, did that make sense? Very good. Oh yes, and mixed reality is a generic term covering any time you're mixing digital objects with physical objects. So augmented reality is part of mixed reality. If you take a physical object, like you get on a bicycle and you're in the virtual world, that's kind of a mixed reality. Or if you project on the wall, you'll see a big mixed reality. So now to, let's see. Great. Now back I worked for 4 years at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center, and I built the VR part of their medical VR center, which was a room and some adjoining offices. And they were doing research, diagnosis, and treatment of balance disorders. So a quick summary. The inputs for the human balance system are the inner ear, where you have accelerometers, just behind your ear, and they work. The rotational ones are just like the ones in your phone, only a lot better, and they also detect translation, but only slow motion. Proprioception is nerve endings in the base of your neck, the back, small of your back, and in your ankles. Really, you have them all over your body, and they literally feel the weight of gravity in your body. So you know which way is down, so that you know which way is up. And then your vision is another input to the balance system. So if you're walking, you see everything is flowing past you. It's called optic flow. It's like everything that appears at the point in front of you and moves onto the sides. Your peripheral vision is actually more motion sensitive than your central vision. And that's why you tend to get sick in a lot of these VR environments if they're not done well. The outputs are, well, you can stand and you can walk. The other output is the vestibular ocular reflex. That's where when you're walking, when your legs are apart, your head's a little bit down. And when you're taking a step, you're up on one foot, your head's a little up. So your head's doing this. But your eyes are tilting in the opposite direction, which is why when I see a video game and they're simulating walking and the view is doing that, I feel rage, because that's just not how we experience walking. And so in every game engine, there will be something called view bob, which does that, and it's always turned off. But that's a side rant. Anyway, so you have these three systems, but you only need 2 of them to keep your balance. And the reason you have 3 is that there are everyday situations where one of them doesn't work. So if your eyes are closed, or it's dark, or your eye is busy doing something else, like looking at a cell phone, you'll fall back on your proprioception and your inner ear. You're fine. When you're swimming, you get no proprioception. Try this. Next time you're swimming, get in the pool, close your eyes, and boom, you will not know which way is up, because you'll be getting no up or down information. Now, people with a damaged inner ear, the inner ear is the most fragile of the 3 systems, and it degrades with age. So when people start getting into their 80s, they start to have balance problems. And to compensate, you use your vision more. So someone with a damaged inner ear is over-dependent on their vision. And so when they walk into a challenging environment like a grocery store, which sends your eye just pinging this way and that, so they have Ph.D. psychologists who stock the shelves with these bright, delicious colors to draw your eye. These people have a panic attack, or they feel dizzy and they don't know why, and they feel like they're falling. So we wanted to do experiments that filled the entire visual field, and it was 1998. Head mount displays were widely in use for research, but they were just not adequate. So I built a cave, or actually I had the drama department from CMU built this. If you ever need anything built, go to a drama department and have those people do it. They're amazing. And these are rear projection panels. They're actually frosted plexiglass. So we projected this virtual grocery store. And that woman is walking. Actually, let's see if I can get the video going. Yes. There we go. So she's strapped in so she doesn't fall, and she's doing a distractor task. She's reading the cereal boxes. And the more colors there are, the higher contrast, the more a sense of motion you get. That's why when you're driving 100 miles an hour through a cornfield in Iowa, it feels like you're hardly moving because you're not seeing a whole lot of contrast. But you're on a road in Appalachia doing this, 20 miles an hour feels really quick because there's more stuff going past your peripheral vision. She's healthy. She's not having any problems. So, but if she did have a damaged inner ear, they would first try to recalibrate her by working her up from easier environments to more challenging ones, or give her strategies like when you're shopping, look down, find out where you want to be, then stop and then look around. So they are literally using the facility to this day. Those graphics are from the Unreal Engine. I hacked the game Unreal Tournament in 1999, and so that they could start an internship program from kids from a local art institute of Pittsburgh to make virtual environments for them. And that's freeware, and that's a whole new story. So they were testing. For their testing environments, they also, let's see, looks like I'm not going to get to the internet here. Okay, well, trust me, they put sensors all over the person to see how their if you're rocking back and forth, people do sway normally, and they put 3D sensors on the test subjects. Whoops. Here we go. So to get this thing working, I used just commodity projectors, and cramming them into the space was really difficult. So I had to create all these mirrors, and that's the ceiling to floor projection. Oh yes, KVUT, that's out of date now. And there's the internship program. So that was one of the game levels. You know, this is like 2000, 2002. But I mean, it felt like you were going off the edge of a chasm if it looked like you were. And we set up passive stereo so that the left eye image and the right eye image were projected simultaneously on the screen. And we had the person wear goggles where one lens filtered out the left eye view, so you only had the right view, and the other filtered out the right eye view, so you got the left view, just like in the movie theater, exactly like. And so if you turned your head sideways like this, the stereo would be fine. If you did this, it would be fine, but if you cocked your head to the side, it would fall apart and you get this blurry, terrible double vision. So that's normally not done with caves, but we did that because, you know, it's what we could afford. So Let me go back here to this image. And that's my first 10-minute talk. So questions. Does any, yes, sir?
So how much does this type of training help someone's balance, and over what period of time, and how long does it last? The persistence improvement plan.
Very good. So the question was, yeah, there's the microphone. How long does the training take, and how persistent is it?
And how effective is it?
And how effective is it? It all depends on the person. If they had some kind of a trauma to their inner ear, like an infection, or they were hit in the head, and they just can't get their balance, you start them off by just lying in the bed and looking at a crack in the ceiling until the world stops moving. That's a recalibrating. You're recalibrating your balance system. Then you try gradually more challenging environments. And to do that in real life, you have to start with like an empty room that doesn't have a lot in it. But with this, we can electronically, we can run you down aisles that are empty, aisles that are monochrome. So I think it would take a couple of months, if I remember right, to recalibrate someone. A person who had like long-term degradation of their balance, they could try things out safely here and gain greater confidence. I'm not a doctor of it. So. Yeah. And the fix is permanent when it takes. Yes.
Is this system or its successor in use therapeutically today?
It is. This system using that same software is still in use in 2017, and they're using it right now, mostly for research and some experimental treatments. Yes. Yes.
Great. So besides the application and the therapeutic use, what did you learn about VR, not the technology, but sort of the creation of VR out of this? Please.
I learned that you can make someone sick in a hurry if you're not really careful with them. Let's see. The higher contrast, I said that several times. Giving the person some control, having them walk on the treadmill, have something to hold on to, that helps. Keeping them a little cool actually helps. You also want to, let's see. You also have to have, and this goes beyond what we did in the cave, but with that head mount, when you move your head a physical inch to the left, the world, your position in the virtual world has to move exactly that same distance in terms of, the parallax you see, or that makes you sick in a hurry. I'm actually one of the 5% of the population who is extremely motion sensitive. The other thing I learned is that if you play with VR a lot, you train out of being sensitive to it. So you can't test it on yourself. You have to test it on other people. If I put on a head mount display that makes me sick, even though I'm like one of the most sensitive people ever, if I use it for a while, it won't make me sick anymore. So.
If you had the money and the space, and you could have built like 70 shopping aisles with each variation.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have needed the VR for that part of what you wanted to do. You could have just had VR. So what were you achieving specific to VR besides just production of a setting?
It was really all about production of a setting and the absolutely fine-grained control we have over it. There's a checkerboard pattern that they project on the wall that moves forward and back. And that's not even VR. That's just filling your field of view. So they use that. You know, with the software, you can fine-tune things infinitely and instantly as well.
Good test bed.
Yes, and safely, right? You got them strapped in. Yeah. Yeah.
So you
Something about
oops.
field of view.
Oh,
Sorry.
oh yes. The question, you'll be next, okay.
Okay.
The question was, say something about field of view.
right? I mean,
Yes.
and the difference, but I mean, what are the limits? I mean, you can and
Human.
and what do you get with the head mounted that you can't get with these?
Okay.
Sorry.
Right. So here, let me get back to. Okay. Here we go. All right. The person is standing here. So they're going to get a full 200 degrees field of view. Human field of view is between 180 and 200 degrees horizontal. And they're going to get their full 70 degrees from center line down and then up. Well, you know, we get most of it. And most of the effect that affects balance is in the sides and in the horizontal movement. So with a cave, caves are big and expensive, but the nice thing about them is if I look this way and I look that way, there's no lag. By definition, the image is all around me. But with that headset is only giving you about a 100-degree field of view. So when you turn your head, it has to update instantly. That's why each eye is running at 90 frames a second. And any lag at all is death. It'll make you sick like nothing else. So that's how field of view plays in.
So you mentioned you were particularly sensitive to motion, and I'm wondering, you said if you play games enough, play with virtual reality enough, it counteracts that. But is there specific training that someone who doesn't play with this regularly, just like you were using for the balance problem for the other people, that you can use or are using with motion sensitive people, of which I'm one?
Oh, you are. You can get used to any specific stimulus and it won't bother you anymore, but that won't help you with another stimulus unless they just happen to be very similar. So that works both for motion sickness, like there's a whole, what am I trying to say? When the first headsets were coming out, I would get used to one, but the next one would make me sick. Now, the high-end VR headsets are very well made, and they're all imitating each other. So I'm having no trouble, which is great. It also works for keeping your balance. These doctors are world experts in human balance, and they got dancers, martial artists, people who have tremendous balance, and did experiments with them. And they were very steady on their feet doing the things they know, but once you get them doing something unfamiliar, they're just a normal person. And there was some variation in normal people. Like I used to have tremendous balance. I could walk across a pipe without training. Now that I'm nearing 60, my balance is not quite so good anymore. So now when I'm in yoga, I'm there with everybody else, but my body still remembers how to walk. So I'm still super steady on my feet. So that's my personal experience there. All right, you ready for the next one? Okay. So I used the same. So this is my dissertation. I worked on it for years, and I used the same software that I developed for use in the cave. It was freeware called Cave UT, and it was a hack on the game. And I worked with an Egyptologist, and we made a, here we go. We made a virtual Egyptian temple. And it's made from elements of Medinet Habu and the temple at Edfu, but it's a stripped down, simplified temple containing all the key characteristics of a late period Egyptian house of worship. A house of worship, not a funereal temple. So all the hieroglyphics say the right things and are in the right places. Egypt is a favorite topic for people who do computer graphics because it looks great, there's tons of it, they only use 6 colors, and it's very readable and at low resolution. And that was deliberate. The Egyptian temple, they didn't have candles in there, so it got very dim. So the Egyptians made their artwork easy to read under poor conditions. So it's an ideal topic. And we made a priest. And I created a game, or I led the team that I hired to make a game where you would have a cursor that you would control with a wireless mouse, and you would click on points of interest on the temple. And whenever you clicked on a point of interest, you would hear the voice of the priest explaining that thing to you. If you clicked on the priest, he would ask you a question, a yes-no question. He would only ask questions based on the things he told you already. He would not re-ask a question that you had answered correctly in the past. And he would eventually re-ask questions you got wrong. So eventually, if you do enough clicking, right, you would answer all his questions correctly. And usually the kids, or the test subjects, got through it pretty quick. Then the gates of the temple would open and you get to go inside. So that's your reward. It isn't money or points. It's a chance to go inside the temple. And then you get to do it all over again in the courtyard. And then the gates would open to the festival hall, or the hypostyle hall is the Greek name. And you do it all over again, and you're learning more about ancient Egypt. And finally, when you reach the inner sanctum, you would again do the same process. And at the end, the voice would say, "Congratulations, you win." And actually, in Egyptian theology, what you've done is open the final gate, which is the doors not shown on this shrine, which will allow the blessings of heaven to flow out to the land of Egypt. So it was this nice learning game, and the experiment was, are the people going to learn more if they do it in virtual reality or if they do it on a desktop? So for the VR, we used the Earth Theater at the Carnegie Museum of Natural History, 270 degrees horizontal, 70 degrees vertical. And we got middle school kids. Educational researchers love middle school kids because they're smart enough to do anything, but they're still young enough so they'll listen to you. And they're all enthusiastic. So they would come in and we would randomly assign them to either the desktop or to the VR condition. And so one kid got the whole theater to himself and played the game. And so the cursor looked like that, and the wireless mouse looks quite a lot like my clicker here. So whenever you've got a hold of something and there's something else in your environment that moves in a linear relationship to this object, it has to be one for one, then you have complete control over that distant object. That's how the mouse works on the computer screen. That's what allows someone to pick up the crookedest stick in the world and write their name in the dirt if that stick is rigid. So they had no problem moving that cursor over the screens and clicking on things, clicking on the priest, whatever. So what I did was I actually had 3 groups. The kids who played it in the theater played the game, and then they took a multiple choice quiz. And then the ones who played it on the desktop and then took the quiz. And then these poor kids who just took the quiz, right? Now, we let them play the game afterward. I mean, we're gonna, bring them in there without having some fun. But I had to do that because it's possible to make an educational game that is a complete fail, right? It happened a lot. Also, the kids are coming in there knowing something about Egypt already that they heard at school, they saw in the museum, or whatever. So, fortunately, let's see. I put the, let's see. Yeah, all right, this is a little wrong, but basically, yes, it worked. I forget where I put the brackets, but in 22 out of 45 questions, the kids who did play the game actually, got the answers right, to the point where there was only a 1 in 1,000 chance that the difference I saw between the kids who played and the kids who hadn't played was random. So that's proof enough. But importantly, people can guess information from a test, especially if you've been in school for a while. You all have done that, right? Well, tragically, I did not see a difference between the desktop and the theater groups. There was not a statistically significant difference. Fortunately, I had scheduled another test after the written test. We called it the video test. So we took each kid and we took each kid and said, okay, here's the temple. And, we just had it on a computer. You take me through the temple and you tell me what you know. Give me your own tour. Ad lib it. And we then had 3 different evaluators watching each video. And the evaluators didn't know which kids had been in VR and which ones hadn't. And they were looking at a checklist saying, okay, they said the right thing about this object or the right thing about that object. And correctly scored key points of interest. And lo and behold, we did get a significant difference. So with the control group, remember we let them play the game? So I was able to take all the test scores of these kids who had done both the test and the game and combine those and compare them to the scores of the kids who had done the test in VR. And we got a significant difference, such that there was a 95% chance that the higher test scores in VR were the result of the VR. So that's, a researcher told me I was really lucky that, my first experiment actually gave me something. So there are several theories about this. Maybe the VR made them just pay attention more. But I don't know, they were pretty excited about Egypt. They were playing a video game, and so forth. I think it's more likely that it's with architecture, right? On a desktop, you have to keep doing this with the view on the screen, whereas when you're in VR, in a theater like that, you're there. You see the whole thing in one piece. So we had, but here's what's interesting. When we just had the evaluators, at the end of the evaluation, just tell us, how well did that kid do? Just give me a score, 1 to 5. That gave an even stronger effect. So all that checklist, we could have skipped that, and just ask them. Then we had 2 Egyptologists rescore all the video tests and got the same result, but even stronger. So there's 3 papers I can send you about this. And the kids liked it. They said they would be more interested in Egypt. Here's another fun thing. And I didn't tell you this, but the very first thing they did when they came in the door is we had them invent a name for themselves, a code name, and we had them give demographic information. And then we had them take Raven's progressive matrices, which is a test of your visual reasoning ability. And that's a mix of your basic cognitive ability plus your skills for visual reasoning. The kids who scored low on this, who did the VR, had a bigger improvement than the kids who scored well and did the VR. So the kids using the VR, the ones who had less visual reasoning ability, gained more from being in VR compared to not being in VR. But the result wasn't very strong. Only a 93% chance that, based on the data, that what I was looking at is real. So it's smoke, not fire. It's very interesting. So that's starting into the next bit. Questions? That's the second 10-minute talk. It's almost like we have a series of speakers, except that it's all me. Yes.
How many? No, I can project. How many?
Please use the mic.
Yeah, use the mic so that it'll be recorded.
How many students were in each group?
Ah.
And how, did you do multiple classes? Did you do multiple teachers? How does that work?
Yes. We got students from all over. We got the Girl Scouts involved. Parents of members of the museum would bring in their kids. We were just kind of scrabbling at them independently. And we had about 90, 95 kids who came through. And we were able to use data from about 70 of them because, things happen. That's it. The first group we used for pilot studies when we were figuring out how to do this. So the first 15 or 20 of them were used up in the pilot study. So those groups were 21, 23, 25, those 3 groups. Yeah. Yes, sir. Use the mic.
I assume, maybe not back then, but since then there have been many other researchers who have done similar studies looking at whether VR gives you a benefit in learning some material.
No, there hasn't.
No one has done any studies?
Shockingly little research has been done. Right up until literally 2 or 3 years ago, the number of people doing actual empirical educational research on VR, on the kinds of things you learn in school, the number of people is in the dozens, and that's it, worldwide. Worldwide, there were hundreds of practitioners, and now that there's thousands and thousands of people getting into it, I hope we'll see more research.
Do some of the commercial units that have come on in the last year or two have material that would allow someone to use it as part of a study without having to do what you did and create material?
Oh yeah. There's a lot of people are producing a lot of VR educational content.
So it's relatively easy to do the study now. So one would assume people must. Okay.
Well, to do the study, you have to have something that works really well in VR and also not in VR. And there are some kinds of learning applications where you can only do it in VR. There it's a slam dunk. And we'll see a few of those at the end when I do my summary. And then there are other learning things where VR makes no sense. You know, you're learning math. Well, I mean, you could, no, all right, sorry, I take that back. Maybe you're doing poetry. All right, never mind. Yes, question.
Thanks. Maybe I'm getting ahead of ourselves here, but in the time that between the first study and the one we're about to see next in 2010, I'm curious about whether the expectation of the middle schoolers changed dramatically, that they were much harder to impress because what they saw in 2000, they probably never saw before. Whereas in 2010, you're competing with, I don't know what the current thing is.
Absolutely. Well, it was kind of, as soon as I started using game technology, I was competing against wealthy game companies. So their art was always better than mine.
It's a big problem in education in general.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, I mean, was it the Giza project at Harvard? They spent 5 years spending, you know, a lot of money making this incredible recreation of the Giza complex in ancient Egypt. And then out comes Assassin's Creed set in Egypt, and there's this pseudo-Egyptian crapola that looks absolutely beautiful, you know, and they're having to deal with that. Yeah.
What do you think you might speculate, if you would, if one of your tests had been comparing the virtual reality to another desktop screen test, so that you could compare how it compares to one desktop learning environment and another desktop learning environment, or if you could have built an entire temple and had people go in with a real priest character. Do you have any comments on how the virtual reality lesson would compare to other kinds
modes
of mimic? Yeah.
Well, I would expect that if you're wearing a head-mounted display, I expect it would work just as well or almost as well as the cave. And that's really interesting because when you're wearing the head mount display, you're only getting 100-degree field of view, 110 maybe. So on a desktop screen, you only see, I mean, you can actually widen the field of view a bit to about 100 degrees. So when you're on the desktop and you're navigating a 3D model, you're rotating the view, right? That's so obviously disadvantage the kids. But when it's on your head and you're doing this and the point of rotation is in the center of your head, your visual cortex is piecing that together very rapidly because you're always looking around in daily life, and that's fast and effortless. That's why a 90-degree field head mount display is immersive and a 90-degree field of view on a screen is not. That would be a comparison I'd love to do. An example. If I had a real temple, well, I don't think I could compete with that. So, questions over there, and then I should probably get to the next one. This was fun. So I have several papers on it. Yes.
You spoke about RPM scores.
Yes.
How do you calculate someone's RPM score? Like, what does that consist of?
Okay. Let's see. Raven's progressive matrices. It's just a series of all the questions have the same format. You've got 9 things and a gap. Which one of these belongs in the gap based on the pattern established by the other 9? You know, that's it. Let's see. I don't want to think about that one right now, but it's a lot. Okay, right. There you go. You see, you're a smart bunch. They start off easy and they get harder, and you just count how many the kids got. And these have been used for almost 90 years in psychology. I forget, they were invented in the 30s, something like that. So there's a long history, and it's a very good predictor of visual cognition. There are some people who say that it is the true IQ test. I do not believe there is a single IQ score. I don't think that exists in humans. But I'm just on that side of the academic debate. So there you go. So let's see. Let me just reset there. Now, so the Unity engine came out in 2004, 2005, Unity came on the scene. And in 2006, I started using it. It was less powerful than the Unreal Engine at the time, but it was so much easier to use and to get into. They got their start using good documentation. Imagine that. Software documented well. That is how they toppled the dominant game engine of the time, and became this behemoth today. Good documentation. So anyway, that's a different rant. So we rebuilt the temple. I got a better Egyptologist, and Dr. Robin Gillam. Her specialty was in Egyptian ceremony, and again, we used elements of the same two temples. And the goal was this was funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities for my nonprofit that I created after I graduated. Well, it existed before, but I was trying to turn it into a business. And we applied for a grant and got it. And we created a mixed reality where we projected the temple life-size onto the screen. So you saw in that hallway when you're walking in, that would be perfect for this, right? And we had the temple, and this priest was a puppet controlled by a live puppeteer, and he was watching the audience through a webcam. He was so good, he could have the priest point to anybody in the audience. And we had a live actress dressed as a musician. The Egyptians had women in their temples as musicians in the time. And these two people are audience volunteers. And they're litigants in a case. And they're having some dispute. And the divine image of the god is in that shrine, in that boat. They really did this. Oh wow, I forgot to ask to be wired for sound. Oh well, that's okay. It was like a Ouija board. Brilliant idea. It is? Oh, okay. We'll give it a try, and then we'll use the microphone if that doesn't work. Okay, great. So where was I? Oh yes, right. So the priest would lead a procession into town. It was a great honor to carry it. And because you had a bunch of people holding this object, it would tilt, like a Ouija board. And the priest would ask the questions and interpret the movements as the answer. And so we reenacted this whole thing. And we had 4 scenes in the temple. So let me play this video, and let's see if it works.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Temple of Horus.
So it starts with a tour.
This shrine has a statue of a woman. There's Horus with a hot pen right there. Oh, yes.
Will you ask the god if my brother Bakanefe will ever get better? He's been sick for so long and we've been really worried about him.
Only the god Horus knows the truth of our health and of our lives. Please,
we skipped that.
As this is such a serious crime, will you state your case?
Any breach in the water system was by accident. It is not my doing, and I was out in my field this morning and it's as dry as my neighbor's.
Accused water thief.
Well, only Horus knows the truth.
So that's the movement for approval.
Rejoice, sir, for Horus has cleared your name.
Ah, thank you.
The sacred boat shall choose. You, in the hoodie, you shall play the part of Isis. Rejoice!
So that was a key moment. That was where, at that point, any doubt that they had that it was a real, at that point they knew there was really a man behind the curtain, and it wasn't just all timing. You and the hoodie. And this, what the, in ancient Egypt, applause was the women would do this, la 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 la, and the men would go, oh, would beat their chests. Oops, sorry. And so we did this at a middle school, and like the rest of the day, the kids were doing that in the halls. And they actually had very important court cases litigated that way. There's even a famous passage where the boat was, the divine image was going to choose between three men to see who would be the next high priest of the temple. And on the way to the three guys, it just veered off and pointed straight at someone else. So that guy became, anyway, I digress. So it was a 1024 by 768 projection, okay? Really low res. This is a photo of a projection, so it's pretty grainy. But once you were emotionally involved, it really kind of opened up the space. And so you had the audience, the live actor, the priest who's in virtual space, and then there's the boat, okay? But then physically, the puppeteer, this is my beautiful artwork, the puppeteer was behind the curtain. There's the projection screen. The webcam was motorized, right? So he could move. And had the actress there and the audience there. Incidentally, with the priest being able to point to anyone in the room, without stereo, if it's just a flat image, it's very hard when a flat image is doing this, you can tell he's pointing to the right half of the room, but you don't know if he's pointing over here or pointing over there. If we used a 3D projection, then it would look accurate, which we didn't for budget reasons. So there's the system. The puppeteer was controlling both the boat and the priest. He was using an Xbox 360 controller, seeing a duplicate of what on the monitor. He used the keyboard just for scene changes. So he'd press the number 3, and it would switch. You'd have this whole canned sequence of moving from, in that case, the courtyard to out front. Sound mixer. We were getting ambient sound out of the computer mixed with the puppeteer's voice, and then the voice of the priestess, the musician. We had her mic'd up because she was sort of halfway in to the virtual space. And these were the controls for the puppet. The head control was completely independent, right? He could just swivel the head using that joystick. The boat it had the rocker switch. The boat would either approve, which is tilt up, or disapprove, tilt down, or point to the left side of the screen or point to the right side of the screen, right? So the actress would herd people to one spot or the other. And then with the hands is where it gets interesting. The rest position was down, but if he pressed the Y button, then both hands would come up would try to come up like this. This is the Egyptian for greeting. It may actually be Roman, but you could control the amplitude with that button. And so this movement, he would control the amplitude, so he could do this. And this joystick would move the hands left or right. And if he controlled the amplitude of the lift and the left and right at the same time, he could do all of these motions, right? And then he could do the same thing with just one arm pointing, right? So you were able to ask for multiple movements, and they were blended together. So there we go. Now this was great. This guy lost his case, right? They asked, who's guilty? And the boat comes down on him, and he literally flinched back, okay? Even though he's facing a flat screen, it's just that he was, he's playing along. He was in the story. That was a great unscripted moment. So, buy the book. Buy my book. Here we go. And we'll tell you all about it. Questions? Yes, sir.
So I understand that the controller person was dictating how the boat would respond to the question.
Yes.
But do you know in Egypt how the decision was made by the set of people controlling the boat, where to point or what to approve, disapprove, change to point to a different person, and how did they get coordinated? Because so how was it controlled, if you happen to know?
We have no idea, because if you read all the Egyptian scripture, nobody's controlling that boat. The people carrying it are dragged along by the power of the god, and and it's like pulling them right off the track and pointing at this guy and lurching upward or downward with approval or disapproval. So that's what we simulated.
Was the audience very engaged in it, or is it more just the person who was on trial? Because the scene is interacting with that person, so I'd imagine they would be more in it. But how did everybody else react in the audience?
We got a lot of engagement. We gave people a lot to do, by giving applause at the end of something that was good. We at one point we had someone who's an audience volunteer who didn't even come up, just was the outgoing mayor, stand up and everyone applaud the outgoing mayor for his or her good service. So, they, through these surrogates, I think we had like a dozen or so audience volunteers scattered around. So I don't know, I thought it was very engaging. We have films of the crew. We've filmed most of these performances. So, yeah.
I was really interested in the Xbox 360 controller marionette.
Yeah.
I was wondering whether something you created de novo or something that was based on best practices you'd gotten elsewhere.
We invented it, pulled it right out of our pockets, and the animator and the puppeteer created that together. They worked together on it, and the puppeteer actually glued objects onto the sticks. Like he glued like a pen cap, a big marker cap, to the tops of each of those joysticks to give him more fine-grained control. And I still have it. I forgot to bring it. But it's the puppeteers are used to using their hands and basically small symbolic motions to get the body motion. So he had no trouble. He was able to use his expertise. So, yes.
So what were you exploring this time? Differently from I mean, obviously it wasn't a quiz, but
really, we were just having fun. You know, we wanted to create something really cool that in mixed reality, and we did give out a questionnaire, and people seemed to like it, and they seemed to learn something from it. But we never got follow-on funding to really do serious experiments with it. Just evaluation. So, yeah, okay.
Did you look to any place for inspiration, like such as Disney? Because I know they do a lot of this interactive, immersive, mixed media with projections and people and things like that, or just.
I mean, not specifically. I mean, Disney was in my brain because I had read their work. I actually knew their VR guy at the time, and I had gone there, but I didn't copy off them specifically. Anyway, so my last segment is a summary or sort of brings us up to date. What topics, educational topics, work well in augmented reality? Well, anytime you're putting like little labels in the environment, like you could do a heritage trail or a museum tour. You could create games where kids are leaving messages for each other, So LAR is a software that's been around for about 10 years or so. It's useful with mobile phones. ARKit and for Apple and AR Core for Android devices just came out this year. They're very powerful. Kickstarter that's going to start supposedly Thursday. That's for like a $5 Google Cardboard augmented reality tool. I used the prototype, and the tracking isn't super, but the color intensity and the occlusion is better than the HoloLens. So augmented reality can be used for simulation, visualization, right? Like no one knows what a molecule looks like because they don't look like anything, but that's a model of one.
Go back to simulation.
Yes, that's a heart. Okay. Yeah, with a lot of veins and ventricles coming out. Revelation, right? You can get X-ray vision and see the pipes under the street. Of course, that's only as good as the database accessible to your tablet, so you got to be careful. Now, ARKit, AR Core, LAR, they only use optic flow to fix an object. So you put an object there, and it knows when the phone is turning or when it's doing this, so it can keep the object steady, but it's not aware of the environment really. So you need something like the Google Tango phone or the HoloLens that uses LiDAR, infrared radar, to actually map the space. So with the HoloLens or the Google Tango, you can leave an object in a room, leave the room, and come back and it's still there. And then collaboration. This is, I photoshopped that in, to dramatize what myself and a friend were doing. We were both seeing that shape in space. The construction industry I'm giving a talk tomorrow in Hartford about this. This will allow them to synchronize their 3D database of what the building looks like as they're building the real building. So these animated pipes that he sees are going to be put in, or he could have fake X-ray vision, that kind of thing. You can use augmented reality for directions. There's this great app called, can't remember it, Chalk by Vuforia, that lets you draw on, you should look it up, Chalk by Vuforia. It's like that. Museums, you can see things in context. Virtual reality. Virtual reality is more developed. Google Cardboard, the Gear VR, which you've seen. You can get, for $200, you can get a 4K camera and make your own movies. That's huge. High-end, this is the Vive again. You can do interaction with the Gear VR. You can have a 3D world in there. It's just not going to have as much graphics as you can get with a tethered system. VR is great for understanding an interior space, situations where real life would be too dangerous. You can use it for PTSD treatment in medicine, pain management. You just distract the kids or the patient and they will feel pain a lot less. And there's more you can do to that. You can use it. In this case, this man had phantom limb pain for decades. He felt his hand was in pain, but he didn't have a hand anymore. And that just went on and on and on. By giving him a virtual arm in VR, it rebooted the area of his brain that receives pain from the arm and actually alleviated the symptoms. Simulate surgery, driving simulators, flight simulators, oil and gas visualization. It just goes on and on. Construction companies can use it to fit their buildings together. Architects, when an architect wants to show you what a design is, that's 3D information. He can give it to you in 3D instead of squashing it into 2D drawings. You can experience it. Mixed reality, you saw that one. Here, this one, multi-user virtual environment, classroom, and a physical classroom, teaching the same thing. Kids in the VR, or in the online environment, were not doing as well. Created a bridge. The teacher could see them, and they could see her through a projection in the classroom. Their test scores came up to be even to the kids in the physical room. You can use a digital dome. This is a project we did where we took kids on virtual tours. Augmented virtuality takes like this bicycle into your VR. And multi-user virtual environments are not my fields, but there's a lot of education work that's been done with them. Look up Christopher Deedy. So simulation is easy. It's a lot on VR for training. I think I'll just give you guys a break. So buy this other book, all about education. And I'm done. Thank you. Thank you.